My name is Joseph O'Hannigan, and I have been asked to read the statement that no doubt you have heard at least once already today, but here we go. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to us, the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You will have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for 10 to 15 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges will stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside the role playing. And with that statement read, it is, I believe, a good time to turn it over to the team.
Joe, quickly, if the judges could introduce themselves.
Oh, okay, great.
My name is Chase Gilliman. Thank you.
I'm Jason West, and in no order of importance or favorability, proud graduate of LMU. I graduated from the Executive MBA program in 2015. I've been a judge with this competition going on 5 years now. So it's a great pleasure to be here and to hear your competition today.
And again, I'm that Joe O'Hannigan guy. Pleasure to be one of the judges as well. All yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fatima, and today my team, JCBG Consulting, and I will be analyzing the legal, ethical, and financial issues pertaining to your company, Philip Morris International, and the solution for those problems by shifting from tobacco to hemp. Our team consists of Marie Geck, myself, Fatima Khan, Martin Lapierce de Tulle, Andrea Rosas, and Julie Zhu. Moving forward, our presentation will include the introduction of the case, an analysis of the problem, our solution, and the key highlights in the conclusion. In regards to the case, your company, Philip Morris International, or in other words, PMI, is a leading international tobacco company engaged in the manufacturing and sales of cigarettes, smoke-free products, and associated electronic devices and accessories, and other nicotine-containing products in markets around the globe, not including the United States. Your nicotine-containing products have an outreach of over 180 markets. It was reported in 2019 that the company held 28.4% of the global market for cigarette and heated tobacco products, excluding the US and China. In 2016, your company announced its new purpose: to deliver a smoke-free future by focusing its resources on developing scientifically substantiating and responsibly commercializing smoke-free products that are less harmful than smoking, with the aim of completely replacing cigarettes as soon as possible. With this new stride to ensure a smoke-free future, your company has created and marketed alternative products that do not burn tobacco, nor create cigarette smoke in order to combat the dangers of traditional tobacco cigarettes. However, the public eye is not convinced that one of the largest cigarette companies internationally is sufficiently contributing to the investment of a smoke-free future. In this presentation, we will analyze the pressing situation of your company, Philip Morris International, and its impact on Indonesia, as the country is the second largest cigarette market in the world by retail volume. We will also assess the present solution through a legal, financial, and ethical analysis and give our proposal to ensure the attainment of your mission statement and further propel the success of Philip Morris International. Your company is the most exposed cigarette producer to the Indonesia market, holding about a 33% retail share of the $25 billion market in 2018, according to Euromonitor passport data. Indonesia is one of the world's most prolific cigarette markets, where about 36.4% of adults smoke cigarettes, according to Euromonitor passport data. The nation's smoking rate leads all Asian Pacific nations and is almost twice the worldwide rate of about 19.7%. Indonesia is the second largest cigarette market in the world. In 2016, the company reported a retail volume of 316 billion cigarettes per year. I will now be handing it over to Marie to speak about the analysis.
Thank you, Fatima. So to start off our analysis, we'd like to give you some background information on Indonesia and how tobacco impacts the country. Here we want to highlight the health impact, the role of the government, and the impact on the economy. So as we did our research about the population's health, we found alarming statistics that about 34% of the population smokes. And just to put that into a different perspective, that is a number of 91 million people. And in total, the country reports 2 million tobacco-related illnesses annually. And out of these 2 million, 250,000 dies every year because of tobacco-caused illnesses. And that means that tobacco causes nearly 1/4 of adult male deaths and 6% of adult female deaths. Moving to the next slide, when we look towards children in Indonesia, we found the statistics by the organization Tobacco Free Kids that indicates that 57% of Indonesia's youth is exposed to secondhand smoke at home, and even more are exposed in public places because according to the World Health Organization, Indonesia has no smoke-free laws. And that means that people are allowed to smoke in closed rooms, such as in offices, restaurants, and bars. The World Health Organization also reports that common treatments for tobacco dependencies are not legal in the country, and that Indonesia is the only country in the Asia-Pacific region that has not yet ratified the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. So all of these issues that I just listed can actually be traced back to the slow tobacco progress by the government, as we can see in the next slide. We discovered a very interesting research by BMC Public Health that indicates that the delay of tobacco policies is due to political structures, policy hierarchies, and a complex bureaucracy in the country. And at the same time, Indonesia is struggling with unclear roles and responsibilities and has a very high degree of corruption. The study also shows how the Ministry of Health, which is responsible to create tobacco policies, has a very low bargaining power and is often opposed by more powerful ministries, such as the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Trade. And when we talk about the Indonesian government and the tobacco industry, it is important to note that the government is highly influenced by the tobacco industry, which puts you, Philip Morris, as a major player of the industry in a very high position of power. And this power comes from the economic impact that cigarette smoking has in the country. As we can see in the next slide, in general, the country focuses on the economic gains achieved by tobacco production. And that is why commonly strict tobacco laws are seen as an economic harm to the country, because the industry is creating jobs and is driving the country's GDP. However, we found that Indonesia actually suffers an economic loss due to tobacco use. And we found that in 2015, Indonesia suffered a loss of about $46 billion due to tobacco use. And the same research also indicates that tobacco farming for smallholder farmers in the country is not profitable. So now, after giving you these rough facts about the country's current state, I will hand it over to Martin, who will talk about the means to help the situation and who will also address the legal, financial, and ethical consequences of the problem.
Thank you very much, Marie. So I will now speak about the solution that you, Philip Morris International, came up with to tackle the tobacco problem, as well as the legal, financial, and ethical issues raised by this case. So as part of your initiative to meet your new mission statement, you submitted a modified risk tobacco product application, MRTP, to the US Food and Drug Administration in 2016, in which you supported that the heated tobacco product IQOS, which stands for I Quit Ordinary Smoking, is associated with reduced harm compared with conventional cigarettes. This e-cigarette was marketed as a better alternative to smoking cigarettes, but instead, our research and a study by Dr. Farzad Mozed from the Department of Medicine at UC San Francisco have shown that IQOS has a detrimental effect on pulmonary and immune function, showing no improvement whatsoever from the traditional smoking method. So just to cite the results briefly, among rats exposed to IQOS, there was evidence of pulmonary inflammation and immunomodulation. In human users, there was no evidence of improvement in pulmonary inflammation or pulmonary function in cigarette smokers who were switched to IQOS. So IQOS has been mainly sold in high-income countries. However, the products are also marketed in middle-income countries, even though they were never officially launched over there. So there is evidence that IQOS was available in 2018 in Vietnam, in Indonesia, and in the Philippines, all described as PMI as key markets. Moving on to the next slide. So your company has a legal history in the US, and this, we believe, could very much happen in Indonesia as well. Indeed, in 2001, a jury awarded $5.5 million to a plaintiff, Richard Boken, as compensation for the harm he has suffered from smoking. The jury also held PMI that same year with $3 billion in punitive damages. And this award was more than 37 times as large as the next biggest damage awarded in a lawsuit by an individual smoker. During the trial, past mistakes were eventually admitted, especially the failure to acknowledge that smoking is addictive and causes lung cancer and other diseases. And this could very much happen in other countries such as Indonesia, given that 266,000 people are killed by tobacco-caused illnesses annually. And things seems to be changing already. In fact, in 2010, Indonesia filed a lawsuit against the trade ban of clove cigarettes in the US. Clove cigarettes are mainly produced in Indonesia, and they're also called kretek. And so they're basically unfiltered cigarettes made with a blend of tobacco, cloves, and other flavors. And so the word kretek is an onomatopoetic term for the crackling sound of burning cloves. Hence, the trade ban of clove cigarettes in the US generated a loss of $200 million to Indonesian producers. In addition to that, in 2012, anti-tobacco activists plan on filing a class action lawsuit against the Indonesian government and tobacco companies. And the lawsuit was based on tobacco-addicted children, and it started with the local tobacco firm HM Semporna, which is one of your subsidiaries, Philip Morris. Moreover, in 2018, a 15-year-old Indonesian demanded the equivalent of $72.6 million in damages from two major tobacco companies, PT Gundong Garam and PT Jarum, in compensation for damages that the product caused him. He claimed that the tobacco products decrease his quality of life and health, and he also threatened to sue the tobacco companies based on Article 19, Section 1 of the Law on Consumer Protection in case of non-compliance. And finally, given the impact of cigarette smoking on the lungs, it could also make its user at risk of COVID-19. Just as a brief reminder, COVID-19 is a disease that can trigger what doctors call a respiratory tract infection and can affect the upper or lower respiratory tracts, according to the CDC. Moving on to the next slide, please. So we really want to acknowledge your admirable pursuit, the one to move to a smoke-free world, and we know that your IQOS device is potentially one of the solutions. However, despite being a good alternative, this move could also result in a patent infringement, we believe. Indeed, the British American Tobacco, BAT, said in April 2020 that it has sued Philip Morris International in the US and in Germany, alleging that the tobacco heating technology used in IQOS devices infringed its patents. The company, which makes the Lucky Strike cigarettes and is thus a competitor of Philip Morris, filed 2 patent infringement claims in the United States against your company, Philip Morris. One through the International Trade Commission, the ITC, and the other one in the Virginia Federal Court. And they both included remedies for damages caused and an injunction on importing the products. The lawsuits in Germany and in the US focused on the heating technology used in IQOS that BAT describes as an earlier version of the technology currently used in its e-cigarettes. So this issue could be solved by adopting hemp cigarettes, which we'll talk about later. Moving on to the next slide, please. So in terms of financial consequences now, we already mentioned the cost of the lawsuits faced by you guys to settle the tobacco case, which totaled $3 billion in 2001. We believe that since it happened in the US, big American tobacco companies could face the same issue elsewhere in the world and face lawsuits for harming people's health. Due to a growing number of people getting hospitalized, we also believe that PMI could find itself forced to help the governments in terms of healthcare payments. Moving on to the next slide, please. So the company's mission statement holds that moral action centers on interpersonal relationships and care, or benevolence as a virtue. Indeed, the company's goal is to commercialize smoke-free products that are less harmful than the regular tobacco cigarettes, with the aim, eventually, of replacing these latter as soon as possible. And part of this solution is the IQOS cigarette device, which we mentioned earlier has a detrimental effect on pulmonary and immune function, showing no improvement from the traditional smoking method. However, these practices are not, we believe, undertaken with the intent to have a positive influence on the world, and especially on the 2 main stakeholders affected by it. First, we have the customers on one side. It simply gives them a false impression that the new e-cigarette product is healthier than regular cigarettes, which is not. And then on the communities on the other side, and in particular the secondhand smokers, they suffer from the nicotine, the ultrafine particles, and other toxins present in the vape aerosol, which is the smoke from vaping. So with that being said, we believe that these are the main legal, financial, and ethical issues raised by this case, which we also think are very important to address. So I will now pass it on to my colleague Andrea, who will discuss our solution to this problem, hemp cigarettes.
Thank you. As my colleagues have now provided context on Indonesia, its relationship to tobacco and the industry, and expanded on the legal, financial, and ethical issues that can arise if you continue the route of marketing the IQOS e-cigarette, I'd like to discuss our solution for the predicament at hand. At JCBG Consulting, we want to aid Philip Morris International and see you succeed. What we are recommending to you is to tap into the uncharted territory of hemp cigarettes. We believe that Philip Morris has the courage as an influential multinational company to claim the first mover advantage into the hemp industry. Both myself and my colleague Julie will discuss the definition of hemp, its existing regulations on hemp, the potential market of hemp, its key attributes, and the benefits of hemp cigarettes. So in order to propose our solution of hemp cigarettes, we must understand what hemp is. I want to preface with the common misconception of hemp and marijuana being regarded as two different species of plant, when in fact, there are just two different names for cannabis, a type of flowering plant in the Cannabaceae family. While science does not differentiate between hemp and marijuana, the law does. Legally, the key difference between these two is the tetrahydrocannabinol content, also known as THC. THC is one of the many chemicals found in the cannabis plant. It is the one that is primarily responsible for the high associated with cannabis. Legally, hemp is defined as the cannabis plant that contains 0.3% or less of THC, while marijuana is a cannabis plant that contains more than 0.3% THC. This distinction is critical to the success of our proposal to you, Philip Morris. As hemp strains low in THC, it is higher in other cannabinoids, such as CBD, that produce beneficial effects without getting you high. I will now be discussing the existing conditions of cannabis in Indonesia in the next slide. So currently, Indonesia is one of the countries with the strictest drug regulations in Southeast Asia, with Indonesia's 2009 narcotics law listing cannabis as a type 1 narcotic alongside opium and cocaine. This, however, is due to the public's misinformed perception of cannabis in Indonesia. With this being the case, Philip Morris has proven to be a great influence on the Indonesian government. Not only has the cigarette industry contributed the most to the Indonesian government, but Philip Morris International's workforce is 35.8% from Indonesia. PMI's subsidiary, HMI Samopurna, is 29% of Indonesia's market share. And as mentioned by my colleague Marie previously, Indonesia is the only country in Asia that has not signed or ratified the World Health Organization's Framework Convention of Tobacco Control, which includes restrictions on tobacco companies from lobbying governments. As Indonesia raises taxes on traditional tobacco cigarettes, it only makes sense for PMI to tap into a new profitable market of hemp. If you, Philip Morris, push the initiative of trade policy of hemp cigarettes, because of the influence that you have, you can achieve great success and can change the public perception on hemp and successfully integrate into a new market that is aligned with your mission statement. I've outlined in the following slide the promising circumstances that will further propel the success of tapping into the new market of hemp. The first being that there is a growing population of hemp users. According to the Indonesian Narcotics Agency, it is the most used illicit drug in Indonesia, and marijuana users make up 63% of the country's 3.6 million illegal drug users aged 15 to 65 years old. The second being hemp is a sustainable crop. Similar to Thailand, in which the country has already given legalized hemp production in all sectors, Indonesia has a climate that allows the plant to grow naturally and in abundance, allowing many people to take advantage of its medicinal properties. The third is a right and advocacy for hemp use. Dira Narayana, who's an activist for the Indonesian cannabis movement, says that Indonesians have been using cannabis for medicinal properties for centuries. In the Sumatran province of Aceh, parts of the wildling plant are used in food and medicine. People of Aceh have used the seeds to cook and the roots of cannabis and boil it down for diabetic medicine. And lastly, being the promising profitability of the hemp market. Market research has estimated that the global cannabis industry to be worth an upward of 50 billion US dollars by 2025, meaning that there is a huge potential revenue stream for Indonesia if cannabis or industrial hemp were to ever become an export commodity. With the occurrence of these promising conditions, you can place yourself as you would be the largest multinational cigarette company to have the first mover advantage into the market of hemp cigarettes. I will now refer to you to my colleague Jilly, who will go into further detail about the attributes and benefits of hemp cigarettes.
Thank you, Andreas. Hemp has many great attributes. In particular, a key benefit of hemp is its sustainability. Seeds of the plants are valuable because they have the capability of developing into environment-friendly fuels. In addition, planting hemp does not require the use of herbicides and pesticides. Hemp planters also require little to no water resources during the production process. Moving to the next slide. Another key benefit of hemp is the positive health effects on the body. According to medical professionals, hemp consists of all the essential amino acids that our bodies require for different processes. The World Health Organization's analysis of control studies has shown that some components of hemp have remedial effects on nausea and vomiting. Furthermore, other control studies also have shown that those same components have tonic effects on asthma and glaucoma. Last but not least, other control studies have shown that those components may act as antidepressants as well. Going to the next slide. Interestingly, there are many psychological and physical benefits associated with hemp cigarettes. According to a news company based in the UK, hemp cigarettes can improve our mood, improve our attention focus, do not produce any unpleasant residue, and provide pain relief. Most importantly, it is less addictive than tobacco cigarettes. I'm now handing over to Fatima for the conclusions.
Thank you, Jilly. Overall, some key takeaways from our presentation is that your company, Philip Morris, encountered a myriad of issues that revolves around the legal, financial, and ethical issues in the past, and are likely to continue facing these problems in the future if nothing is done to improve them. These issues include your company having a history of being sued, paying $3 billion in a lawsuit, and exposing people to secondhand smoking, such as children. Ultimately, hemp would be the best solution by introducing positive health and environmental effects. This includes no potential addiction, pain relief, mood enhancement, and other medicinal purposes. There is also a pre-existing market and growing popularity for hemp in Indonesia, where there will be an outstanding profit as well. Hemp would also lead to a more sustainable future because it is a sustainable crop. And Indonesia has a climate that enables the plant to grow naturally and in abundance. With this being said, shifting from tobacco to hemp will solve many of the repetitive legal, financial, and ethical issues that your company has been facing. That will be the end of our presentation, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Philip Morris, for having us. Thank you, Loyola Marymount University, for sponsoring the competition. And thank you, Professor Marcelo and the team.
Okay, thank you, JCBG Consulting Team. Excellent presentation. I would like to kick off part 2 of our 3 parts, which is where we as board members of Philip Morris respond to your proposal. And after my initial question, I'll pass it along to my fellow judges, Chase and Jason, so that they can ask questions as well. So I ultimately have 2 observations and questions here. First, lots of detail, lots of very specific numbers when it comes to the negatives, if you will. You certainly did your research and came up with a $45 billion economic loss calculation for this particular situation in Indonesia. The problem I'm having is, as a board member, I'm not seeing the same level of detail or sophisticated analysis on the other side of the equation. You talk about all of the jobs we've created in Indonesia. You talk about the benefit to gross domestic production in Indonesia, but you did not give those specific dollar values. I would really like to know how much we've contributed, how much benefit PMI has had for the Indonesian economy, instead of just kind of dismissing it out of hand and talking only about the negatives. So that's part 1. Part 2 is, while you create a fascinating alternate solution, I did not really hear enough to satisfy my concern when you're saying that there are some significant health issues with traditional cigarettes or even our e-cig IQOS vaping alternative. So all of that kind of historical products that we've pushed out there, and you're saying that there are significant medical issues with either direct consumers or secondhand smoke consumers. And I'm not hearing how the hemp alternative is significantly better in terms of health impact to direct consumer or secondhand smoke consumer. So those are my 2 big concerns. I'd love for you to address those, and then we'll go on with more questions.
All right, so if I can jump in. So in regards to the first one, it is true we didn't really address, how PMI has been beneficial in Indonesia, really focused on basically the negative aspects of smoking and really the health issues. But it is true we did not address how beneficial it was in Indonesia. We believe it will still be beneficial if it moves to hemp, because the tobacco crops will simply be replaced by hemp crops. And we also said that the growers, all the farmers will just switch to hemp. So these, benefits that we did not mention will remain the same. But you're right, we actually did not mention them.
In terms of the second question, we believe that hemp cigarettes will produce less harm to the consumers because it's not as addictive as the traditional cigarettes that we have on the market right now. But if we make hemp cigarettes legal, there are the health benefits that we talked about on the slides, like better focus, amino acids, and improved focus.
And if I can jump in with that, we also found that compared to traditional tobacco products, hemp cigarettes have less effects on pulmonary functions, and like Julie just said, they're less addictive and they have less severe side effects than traditional tobacco.
Okay, thank you for addressing both of my concerns. I'd like to invite either of the other board members, Chase or Jason, to weigh in at this point.
Sure. I follow Joe's lead here with, I have 2 questions, in fact, as well. First being, you presented many compelling data points against the legal, financial, and ethical risks that Philip Morris might face. I like to play devil's advocate as a board member here. What if we did nothing? What is the biggest risk that we will face if we decided we aren't going to move forward with any of these considerations that you as the consultants before us presented? And my second question is Indonesia, it was unclear to me, is Indonesia somewhat of a beta test of a market? Tobacco, certainly a global product that we're backing out of because of the health risks, but is Indonesia something that we're exploring as, if this works there with hemp, we can perhaps expand and see that same type of profitability that you outlined? Because it has been almost 2 decades since we've had a major payout in January 2001 of $3 billion. So I feel like on the financial side, we've been willing as board members of this multinational company to take on that risk, knowing that a lot of cases are settled quietly, but the big payouts, you know, we have a good track record here of not having anything so egregious that warrants multi-billion dollars.
I guess
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
I guess to address the first question, so if PMI didn't do anything and didn't take, if you don't take our proposal, I completely understand, but it would definitely be a little questionable not taking our proposition, since the new remodeling of the mission statement in 2016 of promoting e-cigarettes and other heated tobacco products in order to combat the end goal being a smoke-free environment. With the studies that PMI have showcased in submitting to the FDA and such, it showcases that it has people who have transitioned from traditional cigarettes to the heated tobacco products have showed no improvement. And we think that our proposal with hemp cigarettes, there could be less depressing immune and lung function.
Yeah, so if I can just add to that, I would say the main issue is really that how the IQOS device was actually marketed as a better alternative than, you know, tobacco cigarettes, when actually based on the research that we've made and studies that were done, it's not true. So I guess that, you know, continuing to advertise this product as better than tobacco cigarettes when it's not would definitely have a negative impact on the company. And, you know, it would also ultimately, you know, cause more death or more cancers, you know, more health issues like that. And I'm sorry, would you mind saying the second concern again?
Second concern was just there was hyper focus here on Indonesia as the hemp market. Is this a beta test from your lens that we'll be able to, if this is successful there, there's other markets that you suggest we explore beyond that to benefit from similar profitability?
Yeah, definitely. Based on our research, it was hemp is already in place in Thailand, I believe. So it's working there. So, and you know, the soil, the climate is pretty much the same between the two countries. So that's also why we believe that it will be a viable solution in Indonesia. But completely, we mostly, you know, picked Indonesia because of how many people over there smoke tobacco and cigarettes. But we could, yeah, eventually, you guys could eventually expand to other Southeast Asian countries if it was successful in Indonesia.
Thank you.
To also add to that, I know that for Thailand, they do have a similar climate as Indonesia as well. So that would make it easier to grow the hemp naturally and in abundance. And Thailand does have a successful hemp production as well.
So that actually leads into my first question, which is basically, you know, we have a market there that's a very, very large market for us. It looks like 34% of the population, if I heard this right, 34% of the population smokes, and 34% of our employees are there in that market as well. So that's obviously a big market for us. Now that market has, as was said, 0 smoke-free laws, nothing in place, and very strict marijuana laws. I saw that one violation is punishable up to $581,000 in American dollars. What kind of lobbying and or government, governmental changes, regulations would be part of this effort to ensure the maximum success for PMI?
So sorry, Mary, go ahead.
So on the one side, we need, or Indonesia's government would need to address more strict tobacco laws in the country, and they're starting that too. So they just raised taxes on tobacco. And at the same time, they would of course need to not ban marijuana or hemp in our case as it is right now. But we believe because the tobacco industry is so big and is so powerful in Indonesia that PMI would have the means to lobby towards the Indonesian government to make these changes that are necessary. Because I think it's also in the best interest of the Indonesian government to have less health costs for the country because they have a universal healthcare system in there. And to in general have a healthy population, a happy population in the end.
Yeah, so if I can just add to that, it's really, really based on the market share that Philip Morris holds in Indonesia, where, as Murray said, we think that you guys would be able to lobby, the government and really try to make that switch from tobacco to hemp, given that based on, again, our research and the studies and the presentation, hemp has, it like relaxes the smokers, so it's more beneficial than cigarettes. So it would really be to switch basically the tobacco production to hemp. So it would, it wouldn't imply like such a really big change, if I can say, because the market will still be here. It wouldn't be that hard to grow. So that's why we believe that given the market share and the power that Philip Morris has in Indonesia, they would eventually be able to pressure the government to make that change.
Thank you. And my last question, along with the stated, I don't know if health benefits is the right way of putting it, but can you go a little bit further into less addictive versus non-addictive? There was some conflicting information. Maybe I misheard. Thank you.
So overall, hemp cigarettes are not like non-addictive. They are less addictive to the traditional cigarettes. At this time, I don't think there's like a non-addictive alternative to tobacco cigarettes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I will do a quick check with my fellow board members. We're not quite to the top of the hour, which means we have about 30 minutes left. So if there are any additional questions with your board member hat, now is the time to ask. Otherwise, we can say that we have successfully finished part 2 and move on to part 3, where we stop the role playing and we just have an open conversation. So board members, anything else?
One more question on my end, since you opened it with focus on PMI's mission statement. From your consultative lens, how are we doing living up to that mission statement? It's a relatively revamped statement, new values, new mission. Is it aligned with the research and the data points that you came across in preparing this presentation for us?
Well, with what we were representing, like the heated tobacco product is definitely a better alternative, but with given hindsight of the new evidence that was presented with showing little to no benefit when traditional smokers from hand-rolled cigarettes to these heated tobacco products, when it comes to the issues of lung function and immune function, it would be irresponsible to continue with this mission statement when there is already prevalent evidence that it's not up to par.
The mission statement could, stay pretty much the same to really promote, smoke-free world. We could just change, the IQOS device, because that's a big part of that new mission statement. simply replacing it by hemp cigarettes?
Well, our board member, Joe Hannigan, works extensively with the Marcom team. So I think he'll, as a board member, we'll task Joe with kind of reviewing that. We appreciate that feedback.
Okay. Well, if that works, then we're done with part 2 and on to part 3, where we take off our hats. And our timing is excellent. Again, we have 30 minutes. We may be done in less than that. That's fine. Give you all a little bit of a break. So I'd like to start with 4 quick sets of thoughts or observations and on from there. So first, with respect, I'll go back to my question when I had my board of director hat on about, hey, you've got a lot of detail about the negative numbers. Show me the positive numbers. You know, what specifically gross number of jobs, directly or indirectly resulting from our industry and its presence in Indonesia. And then secondarily, the impact on the gross domestic product. You should be able to find those pretty quick. Quick Google search tonight, add them to your deck for tomorrow, you know. But in that way, then you have a more balanced approach. You're as a more even-handed consulting firm that says, okay, here's the good and here's the bad, right? So simple enough. That was number 1. Number 2 of my 4 comments. So there's this whole theme about moving away from smoke, obviously because Philip Morris put it in their mission statement. Craziness. So, and you spent a fair amount of time talking about the IQOS and e-cigs and vaping, and touched on some of the massive challenges and issues. I mean, the fact that they're almost non-existent in the United States today indicates that there are some serious problems with IQOS and e-cigs and vaping. Interestingly, the one exception to that, you know, the bit that is still on the market, at least in the United States, and this is me as an outsider because I confess that I have never used the stuff. So if I understand correctly, the cannabis states still got some e-cig and vaping type products out there that involve the CBD oils and hemp/cannabis products using some kind of heating mechanism. That's the one piece, if I understand correctly, that has been allowed to continue because that has not had the same negative health effects as all those candy flavored things that everybody was pushing for so many years. So, okay. So that whole thrust into the direction of IQOS, e-cigs, vaping, that is supposedly one big initiative that allows Philip Morris and others to accomplish the mission, to get away from smoke, right? If in fact we'll ever agree on tape that smoking is bad and has negative health effects, right? But then I got confused because you as a team are really pushing the hemp cigarette solution. And to me, it sounds like hemp cigarettes are again involving traditional smoke, firsthand and secondhand. So maybe there's a way to distinguish that a little bit more clearly, or maybe to focus still on, hey, there's got to be some new technology. There's got to be fixes to the IQOS and the e-cig problems so that we can accomplish both, minimizing smoke and maximizing the benefit for those who want either the traditional tobacco or, in your case, the ideally hemp solution. Maybe that focus should still be around IQOS, e-cigs, vaping, I don't know. It just got confusing when you went back. It seemed to be backtracking into hemp cigarette world, smoke world. Third of 4th observations, just a generalization that there's a fair amount of data, and Judge Jason West alluded to this. You know, the fact that one of the lawsuits you referenced was about 20 years old. in my mind, if the data is, for us, we're talking about IQS and e-cigs and vaping, you said was around 2016 through today. So to me, any data that you're offering from 20 years ago, even 10 years ago is not as relevant. I'm not as inclined to be interested in it. So if you focus more on very recent data, like 2016 through today, to me, that catches my attention more. Final thought, and this is a wild and crazy thought, and then I'll shut up and let everybody else weigh into. You talk about the possibility of Philip Morris being a first mover or early adapter, early mover in the hemp market. Again, I am an outsider, but the little bit of reading I've done in mostly business journals seems to suggest that there is a reason why tobacco companies have not moved into that part of the global supply chain, at least in North America. And it gets a little shady and a little sketchy, and there's not a whole lot of scientific evidence that I can point to, but it seems to suggest that the cartels and organized crime seem to have a pretty good hold on the global supply chain of marijuana production, distribution, and retail. And therefore, you don't see tobacco companies owning a bunch of cannabis shops up and down, California or Colorado or the other states where it's legal. So there's an implication that some shady characters have quickly moved into that vacuum as it has become legalized and available. And you're going to have to disprove that or somehow indicate that, yes, a legitimate global business like a Philip Morris can successfully compete with the illegal businesses, the growers or other cartels who tend to make a lot of money on this. So interesting observation, no real hard evidence, just a question in my mind. And with that, thank you for listening attentively. I love your enthusiasm. I think this is a truly worthy project. There are serious ethical implications. You have hit on some tremendous issues. So kudos to you, and I'll let the others speak.
Well, just my thoughts. I think you all did a terrific job. There's no question that you chose, I mean, one of the toughest kind of pitches to make as far as pitching to a company like Philip Morris. The first thing I'd recommend is, if anybody hasn't and is interested, there is a terrific film called The Insider. It's about probably 15 years old at this point, but it's Russell Crowe and Al Pacino. And it's all about a landmark case that I believe Philip Morris, the case that might be referenced, but it's just great background to understand kind of what some of these meetings behind closed doors in companies like this are genuinely like. I think that as you approach something that has this amount of ambition in it, if this was a real life circumstance, I would want to know all the bad details as far as what the extra costs are going to be. I mean, you got to be as realistic as possible, because at the end of the day, if you ever watch that film, you'll learn that these companies consider themselves in the nicotine delivery business. I mean, they are in the business of keeping people using their products by whatever means they can necessary. That's why I asked about the non-addictive versus less addictive. If this really was a board setting, you don't want to use the non-addictive words too much. And maybe I'm getting a little bit too much into how the sausage is made. But overall, I would definitely touch on the need for government regulation, some lobbying efforts, things of that nature. But overall, I think you all did a terrific job. I would just echo the comments by Mr. O'Hannigan about, talking about some of the positives. I think that consulting, is really an art because you're trying to sell someone something that most of the time they don't even think they need. And so you definitely want to kind of lead with a positive foot forward, then follow up with kind of what they could be doing a little bit better, what maybe is a great opportunity, and then maybe finish with some positives about the company. And all that they do in the country of Indonesia. But overall, I think that everyone has done a terrific job.
I'll sum it up on mine as a judge. I was super impressed by all of the work that you put into this, the research nuggets, the data points, the thought. I think it just all built into a really compelling presentation for me to digest. I was left at various points of the presentation asking why in my mind. So I think if there is a why that you can peel the onion on a little bit of like, why was the change? What was the change in, for the mission statement? Was it because there was potential legal scrutiny and Philip Morris just came down hard to say, oh, we're going to make ourselves really look like the do-gooders here, but we can present as such, but are we really doing that work there? So the whys and more of that story along the way to help explain what those data nuggets mean, I think will really help the audience moving forward, and still having that forward-thinking lens of like, beyond Indonesia, as you provided feedback in the Q&A portion of, these are other potential markets that you can look at. So it doesn't seem so insular. It seems like, well, this is one, and then let's look beyond, because really keeping the eye on PMI is a global company. We aren't only looking to be profitable. I'm not a board member anymore. PMI isn't only looking to be profitable in one bespoke market. And kind of touched on by Joe in the introduction as well. If you happen to come up with anything of, these are other big companies, the big players that are successfully operating in the cannabis marketplace. I know, I only work predominantly in the US market, and I know there's a lot of research being conducted with the tech players. Do the cannabis merchants accept payments? Who wants to even touch it? Which banks are going to consider having those accounts, and knowing that that's the type of merchandise that a business is profiting from. So it's like, I feel like in many ways the USA is also a beta test in that sphere of like, which companies are going to successfully navigate that. And then Philip Morris, if Philip Morris is not willing to be, again, I'm not the board member here, that leader in the space, at least they can hang their hat on knowing, well, others are comfortably doing so, you'd be in good company. And I think that's the feeling of knowing you'll be in good company along with these other players. But overall, great job, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your feedback.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up all of the speaking parts, again, if any of you team members have any questions or comments, now's the time. Otherwise, we will say thank you again. Fabulous work. We wish you well. We are proud of you tackling the tough ethical issues of the day. And then we'll have our navigator with final thoughts before we all disconnect.
Yeah. Okay, thanks so much. Before we close, I just want to remind everyone to fill out and send back the video consent form if you haven't already. The link was provided in the welcome email to the teams and judges. And don't forget that the judges tomorrow will be looking to see that you incorporated today's feedback into your presentation. And just a final note, we weren't doing this earlier, judges. You're going to hang on for a little while in case you want to confer. But to our team members, thank you and see you tomorrow.